I like the friendliness, the hospitality, and I like the fact that it's a good place to live.
Magnolias. Magnolias.
What comes to mind when you say Mississippi?
It's kind of laid-back state.
Catfish, root beer, a good Stamps burger?
Oh man, Stamps off the chain. Been coming here for years. So I would leave, I work in Rankin County. I drive from Rankin County to come over here and get a Stamp burger.
Maybe you think about the Civil War and civil rights. Perhaps Southern hospitality and charm, the river, or the ever-changing weather.
I like the Southern feel about it. You know, it's home, a home feel.
There's some very differing opinions when it comes to the great state of Mississippi.
Nobody's ever come to me and said you need to go to Jackson, Mississippi, so.
We acknowledge the problems.
What I don't like is the weather, the water issue.
We're also working toward solutions.
We have to start with education. Educating our children.
It's time for Mississippi to take control of its own narrative. Time for perception to meet reality.
Good evening. I'm Troy Johnson. There's a lot to say about Mississippi, and many people have their own opinions about the state. It's the birthplace for genres of music, food, civil rights, and so much more. But I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. You can find all this on the web, the state's Wikipedia page, or any encyclopedia. What we plan to talk about today are the blurred lines. What do people outside of Mississippi see? Is it accurate? What are we doing to change their perceptions to reality?
We begin with Mississippi's history and its politics. Each topic could fill an hour by themselves, but our own Erin Pickens talked to a history maker who encompasses both. She's multi-hyphenated. She's an attorney, civil rights leader, and former Assistant Secretary of State. Constance Slaughter-Harvey weaves the story of Mississippi's history and politics like no other.
I've always taken this position. People show you what they want to show you. Their actions, however, define who they are.
When you meet Constance Slaughter-Harvey, you're meeting Mississippi history. If you're privileged to have a conversation with her, you'll walk away with a lesson more valuable than any you'd learn in school. A native of Forest, Mississippi in Scott County, she attended Tougaloo College and was active in civil rights in the 1960s. It was a continuation of the sense of family and strength and community that her parents instilled in her and her sisters.
I was determined as a child to help people who couldn't help themselves. I initially wanted to be a missionary until I realized I had to go somewhere else, and I was not about to leave my family. Then I wanted to be a doctor. When I went to Tougaloo, I was intending to be a doctor, pre-med, but I got wrapped up in what we call the movement.
One of the most influential members of the movement in Mississippi at the time was Medgar Evers. His assassination at his West Jackson home in June 1963 was also part of the most violent era, a time Slaughter-Harvey remembers very well.
I met Medgar, and I was just taken back by his persona. When we were called to the chapel to be informed about his death, his murder, my whole psyche, I mean, it blew my mind. I was not surprised, I was angry, but not surprised.
As a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and other campus and community groups, she was committed to helping people and wanted to continue doing that in Medgar's honor and for the people of Mississippi.
I was naturally drawn to organizations that wanted to help others. And Delta did a lot for me, but I also tell people, you have to bring something to the organization. And my commitment to bringing about change was more important than anything else.
And bring change is exactly what she did, not only at Tougaloo, but also when she attended law school at the University of Mississippi in Oxford. That unpleasant time made history. She became the first black woman to graduate from their law school, and even that came with tension.
When we took our graduation pictures in January of 1970, and there were no women in that class, nor were there any blacks other than me. Well, the white guys managed to, I was the shortest, they managed to get in front And the only way I could be seen was to stand on my tiptoes.
Constance Slaughter Harvey worked on high-profile civil rights cases like integrating the Mississippi Highway Patrol before putting her private practice on hold and working in state government for almost 2 decades. During that time, she worked under Governor William Winter and for Secretary of State Dick Malpass. She was named an Assistant Secretary of State of Elections. It led her back to her civil rights days.
My daddy once told me this, and I laughed at him in this very building, because this used to be my parents' store, and in the back was his office. And he said, he called me kid. He said, kid, you can file all the lawsuits you want to, but you'll never legislate a man's heart. Back there in that room. And I remember my response, well, hell, if I can, I'm gonna do it. Yeah. And I did it. I tried to change laws and hopefully change men's hearts. After all these years, the same heart that existed still exists.
Slaughter Harvey was long gone from state government when the infamous stars and bars were removed as the blazing image on Mississippi's state flag. She said it may be gone, but it's not forgotten.
Hanging on to the Confederate flag, even though it's not displayed, because you drive around Mississippi, you'll see more Confederate flags now than you saw then, because there's a resurgence of that Civil War mentality in light of what's happening in America.
She has seen a lot in her 78 years and offered these final thoughts. They came from a letter she wrote to her daughter, then shared with her son, then with students she taught as an adjunct at Tougaloo.
We see the change. You know the changes that have been made. We need to look at how far we have to go. But regardless of what happens, remain vigilant. If you don't remain vigilant, you'll be enslaved mentally, physically, and spiritually. And that's the only advice I can give young people. Old folks, we set in our ways. But young folks, you have to remain vigilant and pray it up. And that's my spiel.
Stay prayed up. The phrase echoes a sentiment that was prevalent through the civil rights movement as leaders leaned strongly on their faith. For many, it was a Christian faith that they shared, at least in name, with the people fighting against their cause, a faith that has sunk its roots into the very fabric of Mississippi and the surrounding states.
The Bible Belt. It's an area across the American South where Christianity and evangelical traditions play a key role in American life. It's an apt description of Mississippi. Our own Kendall Jones with why faith is so important to Mississippi culture.
Before we eat, we thank Him for our food. When we experience good fortune, God is good. When faced with a difficult decision, we think, what would Jesus do? Religion impacts almost every facet of our life and has helped shape the state of Mississippi.
Well, I think historically religion's been very important in Mississippi, and most polls support that.
If you're looking for the oldest church in the state, it's Ebenezer Baptist in Amite County. Of the first 6 churches established starting in 1791, Ebenezer is the only one that continues to exist.
From the very beginning, even before Mississippi was a state, religiosity and religious practice was a bedrock of the people that lived here.
Churches were extremely important. They were schoolhouses, libraries, medical facilities, and of course, your place for moral and spiritual guidance. Fast forward to the 20th century, the role of the church grew to include safe havens, banquets, and fairs. Millsaps College was founded to focus on these principles and more.
A group of Methodist laymen decided that they wanted to have a place of higher education in Mississippi to focus not only on religious life and religious values, but also on the broad spectrum of education.
Religion also having a role to play in ending segregation, Jim Crow, and having a lasting impact in the civil rights movement.
Many churches, many preachers and lay people were involved in ending segregation, ending Jim Crow. That was really born out of the sanctuaries of Mississippi, but also a call for health care, for justice.
Many of us grew up with the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, or turn the other cheek. What about he who was without sin cast the first stone?
That's the teaching of Christ, and I would rate him as the most important person who has ever lived, the greatest teacher who has ever lived. And I would think that is the greatest ethical code that's ever been given.
Maybe if society practiced this mantra in a more consistent manner, according to Parker, the world would be a better place.
Many of the divides that we see in culture would be broken down, and a lot of the hostilities and the hatreds that exist might not have risen to the level that they are at today.
So are people still reading their Bible? Are they still following the Word of God? At the turn of the century, religion saw a declining interest.
The fastest growing religious category in Mississippi is the nuns, the N-O-N-E-S-S.
According to data from the Mississippi Baptist Convention Board, the number of people with no religious affiliation has risen from 29% to 33%. Critics of the church have pointed to divisions and disagreements that include women's ministries, gay clergymen, and politics within the church. It seems the focus has been taken off of love, salvation, and forgiveness. Still, the church finds a way to make a difference. And what better place than right here?
America needs, I think, a good dose of religious awakening. And I'm inclined to say that if there is a place in the United States where that kind of true, genuine, authentic faith can be demonstrated and have a ripple effect across the country, it ought to be here in Mississippi.
We're only a few minutes in, and we've already broken the 2 rules of good company by talking religion and politics. But there's a lot more to this state than topics that divide people, like the tragedies that bring us together. We'll take a dive into Mississippi's weather right after this.
I think it's very south and very hot. That's what I think of.
Yeah, hot, very hot, very hot.
Without question, one of the strongest associations Americans have with the place that we call home is its famously intense heat and humidity. But we deal with so much more than just high temperatures and dew points. And as the old saying goes, if you don't like the weather in Mississippi, just wait 10 minutes. And during that 10 minutes, an awful lot can happen. We're talking wind damage, fire, ice, and flooding. And we as Mississippians have become so adept at it, other states come to us for help. Isabel Davis with the unpredictable Mississippi weather.
When it comes to weather, Mississippi deals with a lot. The destruction left behind comes with a hefty price tag, but just like the weather, storms, and destruction, the people of Mississippi are also resilient.
Our job, as it always is in these storms, is to prepare for the worst case scenario, to pray for the best case scenario, and expect somewhere in between.
Many people don't see what Mississippi deals with during and after these events. The truth is, we see more than our fair share when it comes to severe weather.
We have that combination of Gulf moisture interacting with the dry air from the plain states, which produces tornadoes. So there's really no other part in the world that gets the amount of tornadoes and severe storms that we do. So that is unique to our part of the world.
And most storms with a significant impact are usually seen as a problem for another state. Take Hurricane Katrina, for example. Most people associate Katrina as a devastating storm for Louisiana, but it also hit Mississippi.
The worst part was what we had to deal with after Katrina. Many folks not having power for weeks.
Katrina was the 4th most intense Atlantic hurricane to make landfall in the United States. Almost 240 people killed in Mississippi, nearly 70 missing, and billions of dollars in damage, mostly homes and infrastructure. All 82 counties in the Magnolia State were declared disaster areas for federal assistance, so many without resources that we take for granted.
Everybody said, what's the #1 resource in a big storm like that? What do you need? Water. Well, it was gas, because I remember people lining up the night before Katrina on the rumor that the gas station was going to get gas and they'd sleep in their cars.
Resources would also become a problem in Rolling Fork. Mother Nature, yet again, demonstrating how destructive she can be.
We saw the debris ball. That was significant.
On March 24th, 2023, at 7:57 p.m., a large wedge-shaped tornado formed. People in its path say the Rolling Fork community had been wiped from the map.
Immediately knowing that town's probably decimated.
In 1 hour and 11 minutes, 17 people were killed.
He was calling for 6 to 7 ambulances. He needed 3 helo lift ambulances, helicopters, and he was in the parking lot of the John Deere dealership up there. If you've been there and seen that, that's where he triaged everybody.
The price tag for this catastrophe? $96,644,200.
Rebuilding a city, sewer lines, water lines, roads, that long haul you have to look at.
And then there's flooding. That's a different beast. Reports of flooding from the Pearl River into Jackson go back as far as the 19th century, more often than one would like.
Obviously, it floods homes. People, their homes are destroyed, their property's destroyed, they have to move out, they have to be gone during reconstruction.
Efforts to improve flood control along the Pearl go back to the Civil War. Levees were eventually established during the 1960s. They helped reduce the frequency of the flooding, but not the devastation. Many people recall Easter Sunday of 1979.
Interstate 55 was underwater, so literally you couldn't travel through the community. Easter flood of 79 was the worst flood of record, and it was an enormous flood that basically, as I say, paralyzed this whole community, not just Jackson, but all the suburbs as well.
If that type of flooding happened today, projected costs would start at $2 billion. But if there's a silver lining, we've learned from every hurricane and every tornado, every earthquake, and every flood.
We've had to adapt and we've had to react to big storms. I think we're pretty good at it.
So much so, we're the expert when it comes to helping other states with their natural disasters.
Texas got hit, we were sitting here ready to go. And somebody else picked up one of the missions that they had. Vermont's now calling for search and rescue. We've gone and helped Hawaii during the volcanoes. We did that, so it's Alaska as well.
We're warning you before the storm.
We can see the storms better than we ever have been able to see them, and 15, 20 minutes notice of these big tornadoes is commonplace today. I think that's life-saving.
Keeping you updated during the event.
Have a plan. Tell people your plan. Let them know what you're doing and know what they're doing.
And helping you with the recovery.
Rain or shine, athletes are expected to perform at a high level. And if you're looking for the best of the best, Mississippi has several athletes for your consideration. A closer look at the history of sports in our state when we come back.
Here at the Mississippi Sports Hall of Fame, this museum extensively honors and commemorates the athletic legends the Magnolia State has produced. But in the world of sports, the SIP may not immediately come to mind, despite the bevy of powerhouse athletes and coaches that have had success on the biggest of stages. Sports Director Joe Cook takes a look at how the state is about a lot more than football. The presence of Mississippi is in multiple sports across the globe.
You know, unfortunately, most of the perceptions that you get of Mississippi have a negative overtone to them, and I found most of those to be not true.
That's what people find out after visiting the Magnolia State. Originally from California, Tim Bennett is a baseball advocate and CEO of Overtime Sports. He brokered deals that led to the Biloxi Shuckers and Mississippi Braves minor league baseball teams calling Mississippi home for 20 years. Bennett hopes Mississippi's resolve inspires others.
And that's kind of what I'm trying to preach here to Mississippi, to some of the older guys that's in business now that have left the sport, but kind of working in business or working with youth or training. We got to teach everybody here that you got to believe. You know, there've been naysayers that Jackson wouldn't get another team. When the Generals left, well, we got another team. They said, well, we won't get a team on the coast. Well, we got a team on the coast. Well, we can't get Hank Aaron to come to Mississippi. Well, Hank Aaron came to Mississippi, and not only did he come, but he established his Hank Aaron Sports Academy here.
Along with those minor league teams, Mississippi has a rich history in baseball.
Mississippi State, the national champions. Ole Miss has won the College World Series.
Ole Miss and Mississippi State won the national championship in college baseball in 2021 and 22, the first state to have two programs win back-to-back national titles in almost 20 years. Southern Miss has won 40 or more games for 8 years in a row, the active longest streak in D1 baseball. In July, 2 players from the Metro were picked in the top 15 of the MLB draft. Madison Central's Braden Montgomery at pick 12 to the Red Sox, and Jackson Prep's Connor Griffin going 9th overall to the Pirates.
A lot of people talk about the Mississippi competition and all of that and how weak it is. It's a tired act, honestly, because we've got a lot of national guys that say that. And we've got guys like Braden and Connor. Colt Keith down in Biloxi is in the big leagues now. Jake Mangum's the all-time SEC hits leader. Corey Dickerson, Hunter Renfro, they all had big league careers for a long time.
It means a lot. You know, I'm trying to follow in the footsteps of a lot of great players, and you know, Mississippi, we got some athletes, so I'm just trying to put Mississippi on the map and, you know, get our respect back.
When it comes to football, the SIP gets its respect. The state is top 5 in the country in NFL players produced per capita. Some names you know: Walter Payton, Jerry Rice, Brett Favre, Steve McNair, and Eli Manning, just to name a few. Sarah Thomas is the first full-time female NFL official in league history and the first to officiate in the Super Bowl.
Hey, let's play ball, let's play ball.
Can't forget legendary coaches like W.C. Gordon, Jackie Sherrill, Johnny Vaught, Thad Pye Van, and Archie Cooley, who helped put Mississippi football on the map.
Who is swag, baby?
Pro Football Hall of Famer Deion Sanders got his first job as a college football coach at Jackson State. They won 2 SWAC titles in his tenure, but when the city of Jackson was featured in a 60-minute segment, Jackson, Mississippi didn't get much respect. The worst parts of the capital city were shown while comparing the best of Boulder, Colorado, where Deion went on to coach the Buffaloes. Every city and state has its warts, but Mississippi is much more than what was depicted. The Jackson metro area and the state develops global stars. In track and field, Tori Bowie out of Sand Hill was an Olympic gold medalist. Gulfport legend Brittany Reese and Pearl native Bianca Knight are other gold medalists out of the Magnolia State. And it's not just Olympians.
I always say Mississippi got something to say.
Strength coach Jordan Bush out of Murrah High School, who trains and coaches some of the top football players and track athletes, says Mississippians aren't remembered on the big stage, but they should be.
People just don't know. It's just a lack of awareness. But I think one of my main goals is to always, let people know, we may be a small state. We may not be up to the levels of the bigger states like the Texas and California and Florida, but it's so much talent in Mississippi, not just athletes. It's some phenomenal coaches that I know personally that have come from Mississippi or are born in Mississippi. So I think the more people understand that, the better it puts the world on notice about Mississippi.
Jackson native Mo Williams and Quindari Weatherspoon out of Velma Jackson are NBA champions. Add in Eric Dampier, Lindsey Hunter, Jennifer Gilliam, Clarence Weatherspoon, Monte Ellis, and Ruthie Bolton to a long list of other basketball greats the state has produced. In the world of college hoops, Jackson native and SWAC commissioner Dr. Charles McClellan served as the chair of the Division I basketball committee, which oversees March Madness. He's the first HBCU administrator to serve in that role.
It was big, a graduate of Powell Middle School and Callaway High School from Jackson, Mississippi. Ultimately, what I wanted to prove, being from the state of Mississippi, being from Jackson, Mississippi, is that you can dream big and those dreams can come true.
We've only scratched the surface so far, and we haven't even touched Mississippi's massive role in shaping American culture. We're learning all about the Magnolia State's impact on the worlds of music and literature. Next.
The story of American literature simply can't be told without some of the luminaries from the Magnolia State. Crystal Tisme has the story.
Our story begins in Oxford, the home of Mississippi's most celebrated author and only Nobel laureate. William Faulkner has been dubbed by some as the father of Southern literature.
When people use a phrase like that, they are talking about his outsized influence on 20th and now 21st century writing about the South. He really, he set the tone for coming at the region and its culture and its challenges and problems in a really unflinching way.
But that wasn't necessarily his plan. When Faulkner set out to make it as a writer, he left Oxford for the big city, setting up shop in New Orleans, where he developed a relationship with a mentor named Sherwood Anderson. Anderson encouraged Faulkner to go back to small-town Mississippi and tell its stories.
Faulkner always said that he wrote about this world because it was the world that he knew about.
The stories of that world, Mississippi and its fictional Yoknapatawpha County, captured the nation and the imaginations of readers overseas in Europe and Asia, introducing them to a new style of writing that opened readers to the possibilities of the stories around them.
Faulkner is one of those craftsmen and technicians and sort of, imaginative geniuses who figured out that there were really compelling stories to tell about humankind, about the 20th century, that were centered in off-the-map, off-the-grid kind of places. And writers from rural areas and small towns all over the world have really found inspiration in his example.
But Faulkner isn't Mississippi's only literary giant. Later in his life, as he was working on screenplays for some of his most popular books, he wrote a letter to an up-and-coming writer from his home state, a writer who caught his attention with some of her early works. None other than Eudora Welty. After reading The Gilded Six Bits and The Robber Bridegroom, Faulkner told Welty, "You are doing fine. You are doing all right."
And from Faulkner, that was a supreme compliment.
Faulkner and Welty would go on to meet several times in the years that followed. As Welty hit her stride as a writer, she recognized just how big the shoes she would have to fill were.
Well, she said that, living in Mississippi and being a writer was like living near a mountain, right? And what she meant was Faulkner when she said that. Now, one of Eudora Welty's fans has pointed out that, the most typical thing you find near a mountain is another mountain.
There's something in the water, there's something in the soil here that has just raised so many writers.
Welty wasn't always a writer. She started out as a student of the arts with a particular love for photography. In her photography, she took on racial injustice. In the 1930s, the Mississippi State Fair had one day Black people were allowed to attend, and Welty went with them.
Going and taking photos of Black people in the 30s as a white Mississippian was not something that just anybody would do. But she did it with a grace and an ease, and all of this stuff eventually found its way into her writing.
That writing started off small. Long before she wrote a novel, Welty became a celebrated author of short stories, publishing in local and eventually national magazines.
And then that developed later. She wrote a short story and sent it to her agent, and he said, this is the second chapter of a novel, don't you?
So Welty took that story and went back to work, transforming it into her first novel, Delta Wedding. Welty lived to the ripe age of 92, writing up until the end, earning not just some of the highest honors for an author, like the Pulitzer Prize, but even a Presidential Medal of Freedom. Faulkner and Welty may be the most well-known names in Mississippi literature, but for arguably the greatest impact on this country of ours, look no further than Richard Wright. Born in Natchez in 1908, Wright was one of the first Black writers to use his pen as a tool for racial change. As a grandson of slaves, his work throughout the mid-20th century wrestled with the plight of growing up Black in the South. Uncle Tom's Children, Native Son, and the autobiography Black Boy would inspire generations of future Black authors to use paper as an avenue for justice and a means to wrestle with the racial tensions of their time. But it influenced his contemporaries as well.
After Richard Wright published Black Boy in 1945, Faulkner wrote him to congratulate him on Black Boy and also to tell him that he liked Native Son, Wright's novel from 4 years earlier, even better than Black Boy.
Faulkner, Welty, and Wright used their works as a pursuit of justice, a legacy that continues today in fellow Mississippi authors like Angie Thomas, a Jackson native who skyrocketed to the top of the New York Times bestseller list with her 2017 novel, The Hate U Give, inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement. John Grisham, who had a law career in Mississippi and a stint in the State House of Representatives that lasted through most of the 80s before his writing career took off, has also wrestled with themes of justice through his 50 published works, including several that went on to become Hollywood hits like A Time to Kill and The Firm. And they're just the tip of the iceberg. Writers like Ida B. Wells, former U.S. Poet Laureate Natasha Trethewey, playwright Tennessee Williams, and novelist Jessamine Ward and Michael Ferris Smith have all called Mississippi home. So to borrow a line from Mississippi Believe It, yes, we can read, and a few of us can even write.
The richness of Mississippi may be best expressed not through its amazing food or beautiful vistas, but through its music. The Magnolia State has encompassed it all.
Mississippi is so pivotal and so crucial into the grand scheme of music in this world that it's very hard to pinpoint it. We are not called the birthplace of America's music for nothing.
What if we had our own monument here that honored the best of the state's musicians? Who would be on Mississippi's Mount Rushmore? It's a question I asked three-time Grammy winner and blues legend Bobby Rush.
Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, John Lee Hooker, B.B. King, in that order, to me.
And you?
Well, I said me.
Everyone on Bobby Rush's list is from the Magnolia State, and arguably are some of the greatest blues musicians of all time. I put that same question to an eclectic group of music aficionados.
You know, I would definitely say Crooked Letters have to have Wildlife Society. They were the first group out of Mississippi to get a major deal with TVT and Interscope.
Absolutely, my idol, Sam Cooke, would be absolutely first. Frank Williams, who was the first director here, executive director, and also the founder of the Mississippi Mass Choir, he would definitely have to be there.
Of course, B.B. King for the blues, but without a doubt. We could go with Elvis Presley out of Tupelo, you know, when you look at rock and roll. Classical, Leontine Price out of Laurel, Mississippi. You definitely want to have her up there.
Brad Kamikaze Franklin is Mississippi hip-hop royalty. He's one half of Crooked Letters, the group that he formed with Lavelle David Banner Crump. Darrell Luster is a gospel singer, producer, musician, and record company executive. He holds several Lifetime Achievement Awards from the Gospel Image Awards. And Tommy Marshall is an award-winning radio personality, radio programmer, and longtime record executive. They all live here and all gathered to talk with me on hallowed ground, the studio of Malico Records, the independent record company on Northside Drive that for now 56 years has recorded the talents of King Floyd, Reverend James Cleveland, and Gene Knight, just to name a few.
This room where we're talking at now, on this property that we're on right now, millions and millions of records have been made in gospel, blues, and other genres. So it is history within itself. It is a precious jewel.
Kanye West has had to get several samples for a lot of his records cleared from right here at Malico Records. The Mississippi Mass Choir, the biggest gospel group, entity, choir that exists on the planet.
The company has weathered the storms of an ever-changing industry. To make the kind of music that stands the test of time, they told me for decades, artists here have drawn inspiration from a common source: pain.
I have to agree that it's the pain that what Mississippians lived every day, they wrote about, and it was from their heart, and that's what I see from the artists that I see here in Mississippi. You can't call them fake.
It's about great stories. It's a lot of stories here in Mississippi, and the music itself tells those stories. Whether some people say it's in the water in Mississippi. Some people say it's in the food. Some people say it's in the soil itself. But it's about great stories, and it's about the need to be heard.
To me, and this is no disrespect to anybody else, that pain and that struggle and that fight that we've had makes us better musicians and makes us better creatives than every place else. It makes us special because of what we have gone through and what we have endured, not just musically, but what we have endured, socially, what we have endured politically over time.
Mississippi has rightly laid claim to the title Birthplace of America's Music. You can chisel it in stone. Since the gramophone became available to the public just 5 years before the turn of the 20th century, artists from the Magnolia State became prolific. But Bobby Rush told me earlier this year that when he began traveling the world with Muddy Waters, some fans of their music expected a stereotype of Mississippi bluesmen.
So I went to Amsterdam in 1967, 68 with him. And they booed him and myself.
Even though they were some of the best artists of their time.
And they had painted the picture like we was run down, but Muddy Water went with a tie, and I had a slick suit on, and they booed us because we wasn't what they expected. They were expecting something less than that. We were too shiny. They booed us because we were electrified. They booed us. Now, we the talk of the town.
50 years later, a new generation of artists may get hung up by a completely different kind of perception about what they need to do to make it big.
Everybody is told by people who don't know any better. Everybody tells these younger artists, whether they are in gospel, R&B, hip hop, or whatever it is, you got to leave Mississippi in order for you to make it. And that's categorically untrue. If anyone has ever told you that, they're giving you a really, really bad piece of advice.
Being heard from Mississippi here puts them on the map.
The arts are a massive cultural force, but as anyone in the South can tell you, food is undefeated at bringing people together. We're taking a bite into Mississippi's culinary world when we come back.
Would you ever plan on making a trip to Mississippi?
Not likely. Yeah, as somebody who doesn't travel a lot, there's so many other places I think I would rather go, but I mean, nobody's ever come to me and said you need to go to Jackson, Mississippi, so.
Only time I really thought about it was when I was offered a job to go there and play at a casino, and I decided not to.
For many of the people that we heard from, the thought of visiting Mississippi hadn't crossed their mind. The reason, they really didn't know what Mississippi had to offer tourists. Catfish, fried okra, and comeback sauce, just part of the contributions from Mississippi to the rest of the world. Mississippi's food scene, it's rich with flavor and culture, but on a national level, many of your favorite restaurants don't get any recognition. Cecil Hannibal explores how our state's perception impacts local restaurants.
So chopping vegetables for me is like a ritual.
Call it a form of therapy.
It just reminds me of when my grandmother would have to shell peas or shuck corn.
Sometimes even connecting us to our past. The food we love and cherish helps tell the story of Mississippi. Chef and restaurant consultant Enrica Williams is working to redefine the narrative.
It's something that I don't think we just really talk about extensively to say, well, what defines Mississippi food or cuisine? Because it's so much.
From fried catfish in West Jackson to West African-style oxtails, pig ear sliders, and hot tamales at Big Apple Inn, you can find restaurants serving up unique flavors inspired by all the different cultures and people who call this place home. But the Magnolia State is rarely, if ever, recognized for its contributions to America's food.
It's time for us to kind of claim our own story and kind of tell the truth about the foodways of Mississippi, the people here, and the culture.
Hunter Evans is the head chef and owner of Elvy's. The restaurant is named after Hunter's grandma, and its menu pays homage to her recipes. It's been featured in the New York Times, and Hunter was even nominated for Best Chef of the South this year for the James Beard Awards.
It's just kind of that, I guess growing up, I've always told, Mississippi is this, they can't do that. And I wanted to bring that back and be like, we can. And so it's fun and rewarding when people come in and say, man, I didn't feel like I was in Jackson.
But for all of its success, Elvy's will likely never gain the coveted Michelin star. Not because the food isn't up to par, but simply because it's in Mississippi.
In general, a lot of times, the South is counted out for a lot of reasons. And I think that's true within dining as well.
We sat down virtually with Abigail Rosenthal of our Hearst affiliate Chron, who's covered the lack of Michelin star restaurants in her state of Texas. On July 13th, the Michelin Guide just announced the guide is coming to Texas by the end of 2024, but it took years of pushback. So what is the Michelin Guide? It was started by the French tire company in the early 1900s in Europe, and first came to the U.S. in 2005. Its original purpose was to serve as a travel guide, but its prestige can take restaurants to new heights and bring in tourists from around the world. So far, only a handful of states and individual cities have received the honor. Atlanta and Florida are the only ones in the South right now.
You know, when I was looking into why nowhere in Texas has a Michelin star, especially Houston, which is very famous for being a great food city, the answer is kind of infuriatingly simple, which is just like there is no guide in Texas.
We reached out to the Michelin Guide to find out why Mississippi or even cities like New Orleans aren't in the loop. Well, the company released a statement saying in part, before a new guide is established in a given city, state, or country, the inspection team conducts an initial study of the area. They went on to say, as the guide looks to expand to new destinations, it must do so in a way that ensures it can develop sustainably on a long-term scale. But there have been reports across the country that the process is not that simple.
You know, going into this rabbit hole, I was learning that it's kind of more pay to play than you think it is, where local governments or state governments are paying money to Michelin to have them come to their state.
For some, cooking food is not about awards.
People come back for our food because it reminds them of home.
Sugar's Place Downtown has served up soul food since 2008. Glenda Barner uses her mother's recipes and now runs the business with her son and grandson. In fact, every employee in the kitchen is literally a relative. Food brought her family closer together, and she says that is the true power of our food.
Food is the great equalizer. No matter where you're from, I like this table here at the restaurant. It's called our community table. At this table on any given day, you'll have lawyers, doctors, nurses, law students, state employees, all sitting here together eating. And they're all coming together because of the food.
They do it because they just love it. They're not doing it hoping someone notices and then tell them the great job that they're doing. I know that there are amazing cooks, chefs, culinarians, bakers, makers right here. I come across them every day.
Even without the Michelin stars of a New York City or the fame of a New Orleans, Jackson and Mississippi's food scene is making strides. But if you ask these chefs, the only rewards that truly matter are the customers who keep coming back for more.
Well, we've talked about Mississippi's contribution to food, but we can't forget drinks. Barks Root Beer started in New Orleans, but the founder moved the company and planted roots in Biloxi. And Atlanta may have the claim to Coca-Cola, but the soft drink was first bottled right here in Vicksburg.
Tonight, we've heard about some of the shameful injustices that have shaped Mississippi's past and the cultural treasures that make us love the state that we call home. And yet so many outside perceptions remain rooted in the past. So what's being done to change those perceptions? We're sitting down with state leaders to ask them that very question, coming up.
What do you think of when I say Mississippi?
Not much, really. It's too much down south, a lot of bad history, racial injustice. You know, everything related to the 60s goes down to Mississippi. And stuff still happens today. Why would I want to go there?
I definitely visit, but I wouldn't stay, but I definitely visit. The food down there is really good.
When I think about Mississippi, I think about where my people came from.
From the decision to change the state flag to the dramatic gains in education, state leaders say Mississippi is a state that's evolving. Our own Megan West spoke with 3 elected officials about how some of the work they're doing could shift the negative perceptions of Mississippi.
Speaker of the House Jason White hails from Kosciuszko. Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann grew up in Vicksburg, and Governor Tate Reeves in Florence. Mississippi's leaders may not agree on every policy decision, but they all say Mississippi isn't the place it used to be.
People only know what they've heard, and unfortunately, oftentimes the story that they hear may have been the story 100 years ago or 200 years ago, but it's not the story today.
We sat down with the governor, lieutenant governor, and Mississippi's House Speaker for wide-ranging interviews about the ways they believe Mississippi has changed and how to get outsiders' perceptions to match the evolving reality. One shift, education.
I grew up here. I went to Florence High School. I never believed that Mississippi had the 50th best education system in America, but there's no doubt that 10, 15, 20 years ago, there were statistics that people could point to prove that point if that's what they wanted to prove.
What could we do to make our chairs
better in our classroom.
In fact, Mississippi went from being ranked the second worst in the nation in 2013 for fourth grade reading to 21st in 2022. It's been called the Mississippi Miracle, but lawmakers say the miracle is really a multi-pronged approach to boost reading proficiency.
Mississippi has gone from 72% high school graduation rates to 90% high school graduation rate. Our overall educational system has gone from around 50th to approximately 30th best in the country.
The governor says gains in education coincide with economic achievements.
We've spent, working with our legislature, almost $150 million on site development in the last 5 years. Again, speed to market matters. And so these companies that are looking to get their product to market quickly, they love the fact that we have sites situated throughout Mississippi that are ready and available.
Among those companies, Amazon Web Services, investing $10 billion in Madison County, another big business coming to Marshall County.
I really do believe that the cure to most of our problems is a better educated populace that has a job that's paying them a lot more than they're making right now.
By a vote of 91 yeas and 23 nays, the bill passes.
Mississippi made national headlines and major strides in changing its image 4 years ago when legislators voted to change the state flag. Now Speaker Jason White introduced that resolution on the House floor.
We have done some things, and maybe some of that, it didn't start with the changing of our state flag, but that certainly, that got the nation's, if not the world's attention to say, you know what, hold on, this is, this is a little different Mississippi than we remember. You had a Republican speaker sitting in this chair, Philip Gunn, who led that effort when a lot of other statewide officials were shying away from that for political reasons and political gain, and he was willing to take that on because it was right. He thought it was the right thing to do, and as it turns out, it's been incredibly positive for our state.
White took over the Speaker's office in January. He says he's proud of lawmakers working together in his first session, leading the House to pass changes to the way public schools are funded.
Maybe just that. Maybe, we had a big win in education this year in a new funding formula that really kind of sets more of a level playing field for some of our more underserved and underperforming and even really not well-funded school districts.
Jackson public school teachers are getting a historic raise, at least $5,000 each, because of that new funding formula.
We've certainly got some warts and some ugly parts, to our state and certainly to our state's history. And we hadn't really tried to shy away from that. But at the same time, I do think, in the last few years, we have taken some huge steps to move toward not only the 21st century, but move away from maybe some of those old perceptions.
I thought when I was younger, 10 years old, I thought every town had a military park around it. So I didn't know any different.
Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann is a Mississippi history buff. Hard not to be when growing up surrounded by history in Vicksburg. When we asked Hosemann about how Mississippi can change negative perceptions, get more people to visit the state, he shared with us plans for a new development in his hometown at the Vicksburg National Military Park.
We intend to build in Vicksburg a new interpretive center better than anyone else in the country.
The Department of Archives and History is helping, along with a group of friends of the National Military Park. Hosemann says the center will tell the story of the siege of Vicksburg and what followed.
What happened after these men fought? People charged up into cannon fire and died by the thousands in Vicksburg. So why did they do that? And where is the legacy of all of that? You see, I'm one of them. My great-grandfather fought at the Battle of Vicksburg.
Hosemann says the center could see tourism numbers at the park double. The design makes use of a Mississippi symbol that has withstood the test of time.
And we concluded what we needed was a front porch, because Mississippi's like a front porch. Now, whether you're Muddy Waters or you're whomever, at one time or another, you sat on the front porch in Mississippi, and that epitomizes a little bit of how we are welcoming as a state. So I'm really excited about the change that will have in the paradigm of how we're viewed around the world.
There's a lot more to celebrate when it comes to our state and its place in American culture. When we talk about movies, Morgan Freeman is top of mind. Talk shows, Oprah Winfrey. DIY for hometown projects, Ben and Erin Napier. Who's bringing you the news? Robin Roberts. You can test your Mississippi trivia on our website at WAPT.com and find more of these stories on Very Local.
Our history is complicated, our present is understated, and our future is bright. The state that we call home has made life-changing contributions to our society. What all those contributions have in common, they're about people. And Mississippians aren't done yet. So the next time that you're looking to take a trip or experience the culture, don't sleep on the SIP.